Lo que estás a punto de ver son asistentes de la cumbre G20 en Sudáfrica celebrando una supuesta cumbre exitosa. También celebrando el hecho de que Sudáfrica y los líderes mundiales dejaron fuera a Estados Unidos de la ceremonia de clausura del G20. Normalmente lo que sucede cuando se clausura la G20 es que el presidente de la G20, el líder en este caso que resulta ser el presidente de Sudáfrica, le termina entregando el mazo al que va a ser el líder en la próxima G20, que en este caso es Estados Unidos. Y esto ya se había planeado hace mucho tiempo. Por ende, el presidente de Sudáfrica tenía que entregarle el mazo al presidente Donald Trump. Pero Donald Trump no se presentó. Estados Unidos boicoteó todo esto, ya que Estados Unidos afirma que está sucediendo un tipo de genocidio blanco dentro de Sudáfrica. Así que la primera vez que el G20 se celebra en el continente africano, Estados Unidos se negó a asistir. Y utilizaron, al estilo de un berrinche de un niño, el tema del genocidio blanco para no asistir. Una excusa total. Una de las razones por la que Donald Trump realmente se negó a asistir es porque a él le asustan este tipo de foros porque él se ve patético al lado de otros líderes, ya que todos sabemos que Donald Trump detesta la cooperación internacional. Así que lo que tenía que suceder en esta G20 era que el presidente de Sudáfrica, que era el presidente de la G20 en ese tiempo, le entregue el mazo que significa poder, lealtad y compañerismo al presidente de Estados Unidos, Donald Trump. Pero Donald Trump no se encontraba ahí, así que Estados Unidos quiso enviar a un agregado junior, un funcionario, por así decirlo, menor del Departamento de Estado en representación de Donald Trump. Este no está al nivel de un representante nivel alto, un representante líder de Estado. Pero Sudáfrica dijo que si el presidente no se presentaba, no iban a entregar el mazo. Pero el presidente de Sudáfrica dijo que si el presidente de Estados Unidos no se presentaba, no iban a estar incluidos dentro de la ceremonia. Si quieren pueden presentarse al equivalente del Departamento de Estado en Sudáfrica. Lo llaman DURC, la Oficina de Asuntos Internacionales. Ellos dicen que prefieren que Donald Trump se presente en este punto sin cámaras o sin nadie que lo vea, pero que no le van a entregar un mazo a un representante junior. Esto es básicamente una humillación. Y en su lugar el presidente de Sudáfrica no entregó el mazo, lo levantó y le dio un abrazo a Lula, el presidente de Brasil, quien justamente fue quien lideró la cumbre G20 el año anterior, el año donde Joe Biden asistió. Pero viste cómo al final del día a nadie le importó, todos excluyeron a Estados Unidos y se estaban burlando de Donald. Y es triste porque Donald Trump ha convertido a Estados Unidos en una burla. Si se burlan de Donald Trump, todo bien, no pasa nada, él se lo ha buscado, pero él no se da cuenta de que él es la representación de todo Estados Unidos. Mira cómo este mazo fue levantado y no fue entregado como debió haber sido el presidente Donald Trump. Y mira cómo el presidente Lula de Brasil está abrazando al presidente de Sudáfrica, aunque el presidente Lula había sido atacado por Donald Trump hace un tiempo. Miren el clip, por favor.
This gavel of this G20 summit formally closes this summit and now moves on to the next president of the G20, which is the United States, where we shall see each other again next year. The summit is therefore closed.
Así que hablemos de lo que estaba ocurriendo mientras esto pasaba en ausencia de Estados Unidos. Básicamente todos estos países y oradores estaban ridiculizando a Donald Trump. Estaban ridiculizando también a Estados Unidos y se estaban burlando de cómo Donald Trump ha dejado tan en vergüenza al país. Por ejemplo, tuviste el profesor de economía de Colombia, Jeffrey Sachs, dando un discurso en la Universidad de Sudáfrica, en un evento donde asistieron muchas de estas naciones y sus líderes. Y mira cómo señala a Donald Trump por este berrinche tan absurdo que hizo.
Why isn't Donald Trump coming tomorrow? Because he has a 4-year-old mentality, and he's having a tantrum. He's having a tantrum. What is the tantrum? That the rest of the world says, we don't want a king. As President Lula said, we don't need an emperor. He would come here as just one of 20 leaders, or 21. He doesn't want that. He's having a tantrum. So this rebalancing is happening. He's having a particular tantrum, by the way, because the United States is in a deeply neurotic funk. You know what the cause of that neurosis is? China. a wonderful, brilliant civilization, 4,000 years old plus. It's been a unified state with brilliant statecraft for more than 2,000 years.
Y luego en este discurso, Sachs también acusó a Donald Trump de utilizar a la CIA por atacar a una refinería de petróleo en Venezuela en las últimas 24 horas de ese discurso. Y Sachs dice, yo no puedo probar que fue la CIA, pero es muy probable que sucediera así.
Today, a major refinery in Venezuela suddenly exploded. That seems a lot like the CIA to me. I don't guarantee it. We don't have any more news. But last week, President Trump said he had assigned the CIA to operations inside Venezuela, and a week later, suddenly the biggest refinery blows up. So the United States can hardly go a week at a time without trying to kill somebody. But China actually goes centuries without attacking its neighbors.
Aquí tenemos más de Sachs. Mira, por favor.
I always emphasize geography in thinking about economics. So the geography is that at Pennsylvania Avenue, which is where the White House is, now there's a west wing and no east wing because he knocked it down a couple weeks ago, this idiot. Excuse me. Sorry, it's true. I'm just being technical. At 16th in Pennsylvania is the White House. 15th in Pennsylvania is the Treasury Building. 17th in Pennsylvania is what's called the Executive Office of the President of the U.S. 18th in Pennsylvania is the World Bank. And 19th in Pennsylvania is the International Monetary Fund. So it's only 2 blocks from the president's office to tell the IMF what to do. You don't even need to text it. It takes 30 seconds to walk across the street to say, veto that country's program. And that's still power. But it's power that is fading. It's fading in part because of the BRICS. Because the BRICS are saying, we don't need to be under the thumb of a U.S. empire. That's what President Lula said when he was hosting the BRICS this summer, and Trump put on a tariff on Brazil because he didn't like a court proceeding against the preceding president who had tried to make a coup. And so he put on a penalty tariff, and President Lula said, we don't need an emperor, and we're not going to succumb to this kind of pressure. So the BRICS, of which you are an esteemed member, the S in BRICS, remember the 10 BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now Egypt and Ethiopia, United Arab Emirates, Iran, and Indonesia. The 10 BRICS countries have 46% of the world population. Thank you. And 41% of the world GDP. And they can look at the G7 and say, who are you? And that's what they're doing. So this is the new phase of geopolitics.
Lo peor de todo es que escuchamos a funcionarios de Sudáfrica decir que, básicamente, si Donald Trump no se quería presentar, pero si hubiera enviado a Marco Rubio o a cualquier representante de alto perfil, hubiera estado todo bien. Lo hubiéramos entregado al mazo y podría participar en la ceremonia de clausura. Pero boicotearon el G20, se negaron a presentarse y enviaron a un representante de nivel mínimo. Así que por esa razón no les permitieron estar dentro de la ceremonia.
It's the second and final day. There has to be a handover. That must happen. And from what we've heard from the presidency, it's not going to happen if there's a junior official in the room. I'm not aware if there's been any changes. Are you able to update us what to expect?
So every delegate coming here was registered. There was pre-registration and registration closed. So those who are not in the room have not registered because they chose not to register. But secondly, we have indicated that when we were told, remember, we are a country, things get planned. When we were told that we are not going to participate, we are not going to be there, nobody's going to be there, we had to make alternative arrangements. And the arrangements of today is that we have a closing ceremony and we don't have a handover ceremony. The handover ceremony, as articulated by the Minister of International Relations, will take place in line with what the United States have communicated. Their chargé will receive the handover from South Africa, and an equivalent level official at DECO will then hand over to them. You can't have a president handing over to an official, and they are not here. They didn't register to be here. They didn't get accredited to be here because they didn't come on time to be here.
We did not deny anyone access. The United States is a member of the G20, and if they want to be represented, they can still send anyone at the right level. It's the Leaders Summit. The right level is head of state. It's a special envoy appointed by the president of that country. It could also be a minister. And we have always been open, so we have not denied anyone. What we have said, because it's an officials level in terms of that issue, is that DERCO accept the fact that the US is going to be taking over this platform of the G20, and we welcome that they want to take it over. They can come at our offices, and the right level officials will hand over the G20 to the American officials.
So no access to the charge, do you think?
No, they are allowed to participate, so it's up to them. But the issue of handover, the President of the Republic of South Africa will not be handing over to the charge d'affaires from the US. We will be handing over to the US in the DERCO offices or anywhere they may want us to arrange within the borders of the Republic of South Africa.
This G20 Leader Summit has a responsibility not to allow the integrity and the credibility of the G20 to be weakened. In fact, from this summit, we should have a sense that the G20 has been strengthened. We thank all delegations that have worked together with us in good faith to produce a worthy G20 outcome document for this historic leaders meeting. The G20 underscores the value of the relevance of multilateralism. It recognizes that the challenges that we face can only be resolved through cooperation, collaboration, and partnership. The adoption of the declaration from the summit sends an important signal to the world that multilateralism can and does deliver. It sends a message of hope and solidarity across the world. It tells the world that as the leaders of the G20, we will keep fast to our solemn pledge to leave no person, no community, and no country behind.
केवल सौंपता हूं
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. One Earth, one family, one future. That's the focus of this G20 summit. And in many ways, it's also the focus of this partnership that we're talking about today. Building sustainable, resilient infrastructure, making quality infrastructure investments, and creating a better future. A future that presents greater opportunity, dignity, and prosperity for everyone. Last year, we came together as one to commit to this vision. And this afternoon, I want to highlight the key ways in which the United States and our partners are working to make this a reality.
We have embarked on a path that repeated the recipe of austerity as an end in itself, which deepened inequalities and expanded tensions of authority. Now, protectionism and unilateralism re-emerge as a response to facts and fallacies in the face of the complexity of the current reality, and their effects exacerbate the problems we face. The very functioning of the G20 as a forum for dialogue and coordination is under threat. It is necessary to preserve the capacity of this forum to address the major issues of today. If we are not able to find the way within the G20, it will not be possible to do so in a world in conflict. The historic social and economic problems of Latin America and the Caribbean will not be solved through the threat of the use of force. Without attending to all developing countries, it will not be possible to restore global balance or ensure sustainable prosperity in the long term. There is a negative flow of capital from the countries of the South to the rich countries of the global North. The debt problem of the countries of the global South is ethically unacceptable and economically unsustainable. Almost half of the world population lives in countries that spend more on debt service than on health or education. We are now entering a new stage that will require a simultaneous effort on two fronts, accelerating actions to address climate change and preparing for a new climate reality. The G20 plays a central role in both. The group is responsible for 77% of global emissions, and it is from the G20 that a new economic model must emerge. The group is a key actor in developing a roadmap to move the world away from fossil fuels. Climate change is not simply an environmental policy issue. It is, above all, a challenge of economic planning. Priorities are inverted. It is inconceivable that we are unable to mobilize $1.3 trillion in climate financing, while twice that amount is consumed in military spending.
For decades, the rules-based multilateral system anchored by the WTO provided this stability. But the system is now under severe strain. One reason is that the system has been optimized for efficiency in a different era, and it has not caught up with the realities of today's world. Realities like digital trade, as well as the fact that interdependencies are increasingly being seen as vulnerabilities and are open to being weaponized or used as leverage in moments of dispute. Understandably, countries are taking actions to protect themselves and to prioritize resilience and security. Yet, if every nation goes its own way, the global system will unravel even more quickly. And when that happens, everyone will be worse off. And the heaviest burden will fall on the developing nations. So we do need to reform and update the global system to ensure it addresses the strategic realities of our time. First, we must recommit to the core foundations which remain relevant today, and that means upholding international law and the norms and practices that guide state behavior. That is critical to continued peace and stability in the world. Second, we must reform the current system, be it the WTO or other global institutions. We cannot be paralyzed by old ways of doing things. We all have to get behind the urgent reforms that are needed in the WTO so that it becomes more effective and outcome-oriented. We should complement the WTO with flexible multilateral approaches, and that's why Singapore supports minilaterals and plurilaterals, which can serve as important pathfinders towards updating global rules. Third, we should build new partnerships, and as several colleagues have talked about just now, we are making progress with partnerships and dialogues between the CPTPP and ASEAN, as well as the CPTPP and the EU. In fact, 2 days ago, ministers came together and had a very productive trade and investment dialogue covering issues like trade and investment facilitation, digital trade, and supply chain resilience. In the same regard, we should look at ways in which we can bring the free trade areas and the free trade blocks in Africa closer with Southeast Asia and ASEAN. Recently, Singapore also joined with other countries like New Zealand, Switzerland, and the UAE to launch a new framework called the Future of Investment and Trade Partnership that brings together small and medium-sized economies to keep up the momentum of trade liberalization. All of these efforts can form the foundations of a more resilient and secure multilateral trading system. To be clear, building a new global economic architecture will require significant effort and considerable political will. Multiple efforts are already underway, as I described just now. The G20 can and should play a key leadership role in coordinating these efforts, and Singapore stands ready to do our part and work with all members towards this objective. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister Wong.
Thank you, Chair. I will try to follow the Australian example. Let me start. This session is on resilience, and I want to join others who pointed out in the first session the fragility of armed conflict, condemning the Russia's illegal, unjustified, and barbaric invasion of Ukraine, the appalling conflict in Sudan, and our support for all efforts that can lead to just and lasting peace. Now let me speak to climate change. It's been over a decade that we've realized that past is not prologue with respect to climate change. In other words, the tail risks of yesterday become the central scenarios of today. Tipping points are now being realized. And I want to give an example. 2 years ago, the forest fires in Canada alone made Canada the 4th largest emitter of carbon in the world. We have the example of the Darwin cyclone. Last year, or this year, forest fire damage forests bigger than Sierra Leone, to give orders of magnitude. So we need action on all levels: mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. International collaboration is crucial. I want to thank our hosts, South Africa, Mexico, and others who sent firefighters to Canada to help fight the fires. Coordination through early warning systems. The wildfire satellite system that we're putting in place as part of the G7, global public good, the work of the G20 in disaster risk reduction. Nature-based solutions. We're working towards our 30-30 commitment under the Montreal Kunming Protocol. I want to support the tropical forest financing facility of Brazil's COP, as well as the broader effort, and congratulate them on that. In terms of our own mitigation, I'll just frame it as follows. We view addressing climate change as a moral duty, but also a commercial imperative, as Prime Minister Albanese just intimated. So our strategy on reducing emissions is a climate competitiveness strategy because it will make our businesses stronger.
Pero bueno amigos, llegamos al final del video y te quiero dejar con un mensaje que, más que un mensaje, es una recomendación que te he dejado en varios videos atrás. Mira, Estados Unidos es un país que está sufriendo una crisis. Diría dos, incluso. Una recesión económica y una estanflación. La recesión todos sabemos lo que es. Ya lo ha vivido Estados Unidos incluso. Es una abominación en contra de la economía de un país y contra la estabilidad de las personas. Estabilidad económica. Pero una estanflación es algo difícil que ocurra. Una estanflación es cuando una economía tiene mucha inflación y mucho desempleo. O sea, en otras palabras, cuando una economía o un país tiene precios muy altos y poco dinero, poco ingreso de dinero a las personas. Eso va de la mano con el desempleo. ¿Qué pasa cuando existe una estanflación en un país? Cuando esto pasa en un país, las personas sencillamente no pueden tener dinero ni siquiera para comer, o tienen que elegir, o tienen para pagar la hipoteca o la renta o la comida. ¿Y qué hacen las personas? Pues bueno, como no tienen dinero, no tienen trabajo o no les alcanza con el dinero que tienen, piden préstamos al banco. Ahora, ¿cuál es mi recomendación? Si tú estás viendo esto y tienes la bendición, porque como siempre te digo, sí es una bendición tener un trabajo, yo te recomendaría que trates de ahorrar lo más que puedas. Gasta en lo básico y ahorra el resto. Esto por meses. Gasta en lo básico, ahorra el resto. Se viene Navidad, yo entiendo que hay regalos, hay gastos, hay comidas, hay cenas. Perfecto. Busca ahorrar lo más que puedas. Son épocas muy difíciles, van a ser épocas peores. Recuerda que todo esto ha pasado gracias a las políticas presupuestarias de Donald Trump, las políticas arancelarias de Donald Trump y estas guerras comerciales inútiles que ha tenido. Así que si esto ha pasado en casi 11 meses que lleva como presidente, imagínate qué va a pasar en los 3 años y un mes que le quedan. Exacto, puede destruir el país. Así que lo que tú tienes que hacer es prepararte. Guarda todo lo que puedas, en el banco y en efectivo. ¿Por qué en el banco y en efectivo? Como te dije hace un ratito, la gente cuando ya no tiene, ¿qué hace? Préstamos al banco, préstamos al banco. El banco tiene una cantidad de dinero increíble, pero recuerda que todo ese dinero lo tiene en gran mayoría, un 90% depende del banco, prestado, lo tiene en hipotecas, lo tiene en tantas cosas, en inversiones. O sea que el banco no puede decir, aquí tengo todo el efectivo y lo voy a entregar. No. Si pasa esto de que la gente se desespera y comienza a sacar todo el dinero que pueda del banco, ¿qué va a pasar? El banco va a tener que cerrar sus puertas o pedirle al Estado que lo ayude. Pero con un Estado que está en recesión y en estanflación, no van a poder salvarlo. Así que únicamente el banco va a tener que cerrar sus puertas indefinidamente. ¿Qué va a pasar? Si tú tienes dinero en efectivo, que de verdad guarda en efectivo, al menos para sobrevivir en efectivo 2 meses, que un banco no puede estar cerrado más de 2 meses. Puedes sobrevivir, al menos pagar tu renta, pagar comida, medicina en el caso de que necesites, bebida y no perder la vida por cosas innecesarias. Porque sí, me dirás loco, pero puedes ver la historia en 1929, lo que pasó con la gran recesión. Puedes ver lo que pasó en el 2008 con la explosión de la burbuja inmobiliaria. Cuando hay crisis económica, las personas pueden incluso perder la vida por la incapacidad de poder obtener alimentos. Así que créeme, Este consejo ni siquiera viene de mí como economista, no viene de mí como asesor financiero, viene de mí como alguien que ya vio lo que puede suceder cuando hay crisis económicas. Te advierto que puedes evitarlo con un poco de ahorro, si es que tienes la posibilidad, claro. Y bueno, muchas gracias por ver el video hasta el final, de verdad lo aprecio muchísimo. Y como siempre te digo, si te gusta el contenido de política estadounidense, te gusta saber lo que está pasando realmente en el país, te va a encantar suscribirte al canal. Mi nombre es José Alvarado, soy economista y estoy comprometido a informarte diariamente. Nos vemos en el siguiente video. Adiós.